We'll start tonight with a big announcement for this country's Air Force. Boeing has scored a sole source contract to supply the next generation of Canada's military patrol planes, with the feds announcing a $10.4 billion contract. 14 Boeing P-8A Poseidon aircrafts will replace Canada's aging Aurora fleet. The full fleet will be delivered between 2026 and 2027. As part of the contract, Boeing has agreed to invest at least $5.4 billion in the Canadian economy. Canada is now the last of Five Eyes allies to procure the Poseidon, and Defence Minister Bill Blair announced the deal, insisting it is the only plane that meets Canada's requirements. The minister is with us now. Hi, Minister Blair. Pleasure to welcome you back to the show. Thanks for making the time.
Of course, Vassy. How are you?
Good, thanks. I hope you're well as well. Minister, the premiers of Ontario and Quebec, along with the National Defence Committee, all called on you to have an open competition for this lucrative contract. Why did they fail to convince you?
Well, Vassy, first of all, the Air Force was very clear in identifying what its operational requirements were for a multi-mission aircraft. And when we examined all of the options that were available, there turned out to be only one. The only plane that met all of those requirements that exist today was the Poseidon P-8 Alpha 8 aircraft, which is manufactured by Boeing, and there were no other planes that met those requirements. There were a number of other alternatives, not a different plane, but development options as I would define them. But there's a great deal of uncertainty in those development options with respect to costs, with respect to delivery schedules and capability. The only plane that met the requirements of the Air Force was the Poseidon, and that's why we have selected that plane.
I'm hoping you can offer some clarity on those operational requirements, because as of June 30th, on the military, on the government's own website, the Aurora fleet is described as state-of-the-art. You're saying now that it's on its last legs. How did you come to that conclusion?
By listening to the Air Force. And in fact, we acquired the Aurora CP-140 in 1982. And at that time, it was anticipated to have a 30-year lifespan, and we have extended that quite considerably, right up to 2030. But what we've heard very clearly from the Air Force is the existing aircraft, the Aurora 140, has reached its capacity. That you can't add any more electronics to that aircraft. It has and continues to be in service. But we listened to our aviators, and in particular, one of the things I found compelling was not only their ability to engage in anti-submarine detection and warfare, was the defensive capabilities of the existing aircraft. The Aurora was quite limited, which puts our people in a conflict situation at considerable risk. And also their ability to take on some of the new, very significant challenges that we're now experiencing.
Right.
Certainly the aggression we're seeing at sea from the Russians, from the Chinese, in our Arctic, and around the world, really does compel us to listen to the armed forces, to listen to the Air Force. They said they needed this capability, and today we were able to deliver it for them.
And I do certainly have some questions about the security environment in just a moment, but I also want to read to you exactly what the website said. And I checked, it was updated at the end of June. It described the Aurora fleet as having been modernized with a world-class integrated mission suite with state-of-the-art avionics, communication systems, computer networks, and sensors. And I'll tell you, Minister, why I'm asking you, because Bombardier, of course, is claiming that what you are talking about, this idea that it is necessary, that there's only one company that could fulfill the order, they are saying that isn't true. So can you reconcile why your own website says the fleet is modernized and certainly state-of-the-art, and now you're saying that the Air Force is telling you the opposite?
Well, what the Air Force made very clear to me is that they have done everything they can on the Aurora 140 platform, that our crews continue to do exceptional service with it. But what we heard very clearly from our aviators and from the Canadian Armed Forces is that particular aircraft had reached its full potential, and that there was no capacity to continue to develop, notwithstanding our adversaries are increasingly using more sophisticated technology, and, for example, detecting submarines is becoming increasingly challenging. We've heard that very clearly even in our press conference today from General Menard and General McKenna, and for the aviators that have been flying the 140. I'm proud of the work that they have been doing for nearly 40 years on that aircraft. but it really has reached the end of its life cycle. And as we move into the increasing challenges of an increasingly difficult threat environment, we've seen the modernization and significant advances in capability among our allies. The only plane that is currently available that meets the capabilities that were defined for us by the Air Force is the Poseidon. And it was the only choice we had available to us. It met all of the requirements. I believe it was the right choice for them. The alternative, there is no other plane. The only alternative that was available to us, and there are many aeronautics companies capable of offering a developmental solution, but we also know that those developmental solutions can take a very long time. It does create a great deal of uncertainty about what the developmental costs would be, whether or not it would meet the important capabilities that are defined by the Air Force, and whether or not they would be able to meet certain schedules. All of that uncertainty, I think, was unacceptable in the current environment. So we responded to what the Air Force said they required to do their job.
And just before I ask about the environment, very quickly, did the U.S. pressure you or your government in any way to make this agreement? Did they want you to buy this plane over any kind of made in Canada solution?
Let me be really clear here, Vassy. This is a decision that was made in Canada by Canadians. It was made, first of all, we worked very closely. I and my predecessors as Minister of Defense have worked very closely with Canadian Armed Forces. We worked with the Air Force. They defined their capability requirements, and then we worked with them to go and find the best possible solution. We did a very extensive examination of what those capabilities could be, and we found that the Poseidon P-8 Alpha aircraft was the only one that actually met the capabilities that the Canadian Armed Forces, our Air Force, said they required to do the important job. They defined those requirements very clearly, and the only aircraft that was currently capable of delivering on those capabilities was the Poseidon.
Okay, and the threat environment that I found very interesting, the way in which you detailed how it informed this decision, and your officials as well, the urgency with which you described this decision had to be made, and that these planes need to be replaced. I wanted to ask how you reconcile that description with the fact that there will be substantial budget cuts to the overall bottom line for national defense over the next 20 years. Dave Perry, a military analyst, has looked at the budget and the fall economic statement, and together over the next 2 decades, we're looking at anywhere from $20 to $25 billion worth of cuts. How do you reconcile that for Canadians watching against how you describe the threat environment as so insecure right now?
Yeah, first of all, let me just back you up a little bit, if I may. In 2017, our government committed to the strong, secure, and engaged defense policy that committed significant additional dollars to defense. We're continuing to make those investments as part of the SSE policy announcement. As a matter of fact, the $10 billion we're now committing to the replacement of our multi-mission aircraft is part of that 2017 budget announcement. But one of the things that we have also clearly recognized, 2 things. First of all, we have said that the rapidly deteriorating threat environment requires us to continue to make additional significant investments. And at the same time, Vassy, what I've tried to make very clear is we have a responsibility when we're spending public dollars to do it in a way that ensures that we're buying the right things at the right price, and that will enable our armed forces to do the job. We're supposed to be careful when we're spending people's money, and we are. And so we're looking at defense expenditures that don't impact on the capability of the Canadian Armed Forces or provide support and services to the men and women of the Canadian Armed Forces. Things like consultant reports and some professional services, not all of course, but some, and even executive travel. And so we are looking very carefully to make sure that we're spending those Canadian tax dollars to the best possible benefit,
Minister,
and ensuring that the Canadian Armed Forces get the resources that they need to do their job.
And pardon the interruption, but with great respect, look at all of travel for everyone in D&D. It's somewhere in the neighborhood of a few $100 million. If you cut executive travel, that's just a portion of that. There is no way that if you look at $20 billion over 20 years, it will not impact operations, which, by the way, the commander of the Navy and other officials like the CDS as well is saying is already threatened right now, is already in peril right now. I have trouble understanding how you can say out of one part of you that we want to keep investing, and at the same time we're just going to make these cuts on travel and consultants. There's no way it's $20 billion worth.
No, and Vassy, let me try to explain this to you. We've already made a very significant commitment to upgrading our naval fleet. We've invested already in Arctic offshore patrol vessels. 4 of them have already been delivered. We've also committed significant resources to the creation of new Canadian combat surface ships to replace the existing Halifax fleet. We've got to continue to maintain the fleet. The Admiral was very clear in that in the video he put out the other day, that we have a responsibility to continue to maintain the Halifax fleet while we build those new ships. We've also made commitments to a new fighter jet for our Air Force, the F-35. They'll begin to be delivered in the next 2 years. We've listened very carefully to the multi-mission aircraft for submarine hunting and search and rescue. And so now, today, we've announced the investment we're making in that. One of the responsibilities I also have is to make sure that we provide the Canadian Armed Forces with the platforms, the equipment, and the supports that the men and women of the Canadian Forces need. And I believe that that's going to also enable us to solve the very significant challenge that the Chief of Defense and the Admiral in charge of our Navy have identified in attracting the best and the brightest to the Canadian Armed Forces. That's the job. And at the same time, when we're spending and making those investments in Canada's national defense, it is incumbent upon all of us to make sure that we are investing those dollars in a way that produces the best result for Canadians, and to make sure that expenditures that don't add to defense capability, that don't help us accomplish the mission and perform both domestically and around the world, and there are some expenditures in any bureaucracy. It is incumbent upon us to go and look at how those dollars are being spent to make sure that we're producing real value for Canadians.
Sure, and no one, Minister, listening would disagree with that. But are you telling Canadians that there are $20 billion worth of superfluous expenditures right now in the military, when sources tell me maintenance budgets are already being cut as a result of your budget cuts?
No, and Vassy, again, nobody said that there's $20 billion in superfluous expenditures. That would be silly.
But that's what you're cutting.
What we have said is no, I disagree. There is, over time, we know in every bureaucracy there are processes which may not be the most efficient in how we administer our people, how we recruit and retain them, how we support them, how we engage in our procurement processes. All of those require that we are always looking for ways to do the job more efficiently and at less cost to Canadian taxpayers. And at the same time, I think we demonstrated today that we are unwavering in our commitment to continue to make sure that we supply the Canadian Armed Forces with the ships, the planes, the jets, the ammunition, the munitions that they need. And also, I also want to assure the men and women of the Canadian Armed Forces that we're also committed to providing them with the supports in healthcare and housing and childcare and all of the things that enable them to do the really important job of keeping our nation safe.
Minister, despite all of that, as I mentioned, the head of the Navy put out a video detailing how insufficient right now staffing is, for example, even to man the combatant ships that you just detailed. There are more on the way of. I know that you had talked, and your predecessor had talked about addressing massive recruitment issues with the Defense Policy Review. We are now a full 19 months after that review was launched. When will it be made public? When will it be concluded?
Yeah, first of all, the Admiral did talk about the challenges that he faces in recruiting, but he also talked about some of the very innovative ways in which he's trying to increase recruitment, and we're going to continue to support those things, because it is really the strength of our organization is the men and women who serve. And so getting the best and the brightest to consider a career in the Canadian Armed Forces, I think it's everybody's job, and that's the Chief of Defense, the head of our Navy, and the head of our Air Force, and the head of our Army. That everybody in the service has that most important job to do. And at the same time, we have talked about, as a result of significant investments we made in 2017 through the Safe, Strong, Secure and Engaged initiative, we've said, because the situation continues to become increasingly challenging, that there's more investment to be made. Those decisions around the budget that would be required to do that are being discussed right now in government.
Okay.
They are also contextualized by the fiscal situation the nation faces. But let me assure you, and I hope we demonstrated today, that we understand the importance of these investments. We're going to make those investments, but we're going to do them right, and we're going to make sure that we deliver for the armed forces the tools that they need.
Minister, with great respect, that didn't answer the question I posed, which was, when is the Defense Policy Review being released. You're facing a shortfall of 16,000 people. You are unable to man key pieces, integral pieces of equipment that you are now in the process of acquiring, according to your own staff, the people who lead the military. When will the Defense Policy Review be released 19 months after you first announced it?
Well, again, Vassy, with all due respect, we've been working very closely with Canadian Armed Forces and their leadership and the men and women that serve throughout all of their ranks to make sure that we deliver for them the tools that they need, the support that they need to do the important missions that they've been assigned. As I did mention to you earlier, the discussion around the significant additional investments that are going to be required through our defense policy update are currently underway as part of a discussion of a larger budget considerations that governments must do. What is important for us is that we make the right investments, that we acquire the tools that are actually needed, and at the same time, I think Canadians do still expect of us that we will be very careful in how we expend their money to produce the best value for them. There are a number of important considerations right across this country, and our government is taking all of that into account. We will make the investments that the defense community requires, but we will do it in a very thoughtful and careful way so that we make sure that we deliver for Canadians. We deliver for the Canadian Armed Forces. They do a terribly important job for us. I want to make sure that they've got the tools that they need to do that job, but at the same time, we're going to do it in a way which is responsible in how we expend those dollars.
Okay, Minister, I've taken a lot of your time. I do appreciate it this evening. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you very much.